Ace Combat 4 Shattered Skies, also known as Distant Thunder if you're in a crappy country, is an arcade flight action game for the PlayStation 2. Now, if you haven't played this game yet, go play it right now. It's only like $5. This video is going to contain spoilers, because even though it says review, it's mostly just an excuse for me to ramble about how great Ace Combat 4 is. Not to say it's a perfect game, it definitely has its flaws, looking at you, Tango Line, but we'll talk about those later. For now, let's start at the beginning. So there I was, a stupid little kid at the local game store, trying to decide between this cool-looking airplane game or Larry Boy and the Bad Apple. Thankfully, I made the right choice, and when I got home, I was utterly entranced by the graphics, the music, and just the overall presentation of this image. A few hours later, I realized that it was just a loading screen and the game disc was broken, so I had to settle for measly old Ace Combat 4. So I strapped in for some high-octane supersonic aerial mayhem, booted up the game, and then this happened.
One fleeing plane fell out of the skies, spiraling and spewing orange flames to crash by the Cape. The same Cape where my family lived.
Right out of the gate, Ace Combat 4 just hits you with this somber tone out of nowhere, and the kid's storyline maintains a depressingly melancholic tone throughout the rest of the game. That isn't to say it's one of those annoyingly preachy anti-war games. After all, it is an adrenaline-fueled power fantasy where you blow up thousands of people with missiles. But by having a more nuanced narrative than the Tom Clancy fanfictions of its contemporaries, Ace Combat 4 really stands out in my mind as one of the more memorable video game stories. You play as Mobius 1, a silent protagonist fighter pilot who has to do all the heavy lifting for his useless allies. The game opens with a short little mission where you shoot down some bombers, and immediately you're just hooked by the game's overall sense of style. The cool and confident voice of your commander calls out every kill you make, and your enemies panic as their formation is slowly picked apart. The voice acting isn't exactly great,
Radio failure!
but its campy delivery helps drive home that signature Ace Combat flavor of stupidly over-the-top battle scenarios played completely straight. It's kind of like Star Wars in the sense that if you take a second and zoom out, then it's completely ridiculous. But something about the overall presentation is just super engaging, and it makes you buy it in the moment. Whether you're dodging and weaving through a furball of fighters that are practically on top of each other, performing a strafing run while dodging anti-air fire from the ground, or desperately trying to align your gun crosshairs with a particularly nimble opponent, the moment-to-moment gameplay of Ace Combat 4 is just plain fun. Ace Combat 4 is not a long game, though the campaign can drag on due to some repetitive objectives. Half of the game's 18 missions are score attack levels, where the only requirement is that you score a certain amount of points before the timer runs out. Some of these aren't so bad, but the problem is that getting a good enough score to pass the level will likely only take you about half of the mission time. So for the latter half, you're just waiting for the clock to tick down. Now you do need to utilize every second you get to achieve an ace ranking, but if you're just playing through the game casually, then the risk of dying and being forced to restart the whole mission outweighs the potential to increase your score. You have levels like Whiskey Corridor, Siege of Farbanti, and Tango Line, which are all 20 minutes long with no checkpoints, especially Tango Line. All the targets are way too spread out, and it also features one of the only pieces of Ace Combat music that I actively dislike. Alright, back to the fanboy stuff. I love blowing up this substation. The music in Blockade is so good. The little cutscene it plays at the end of Invincible Fleet is just adorable. How are we even supposed to know what song that is? Speaking of songs, Kimona is the greatest song in history. Destroying Stonehenge is epic, but then you feel kind of bad for killing Yellow 4. The final duel with Yellow 13 is so bittersweet. And to top it all off, you've got Megalith. When asked what his favorite moment in all of Ace Combat was, series director Kazutoki Kono had this to say: "It's not exactly a moment, but when I was creating the final mission of Ace Combat 4, all the elements were synchronized. Spectacular soundtrack using choirs and orchestra, the variety of radio dialogue, the bizarre megaliths illuminated by the sun, meteors falling from the skies and birds flying, and I felt that this is the way Ace Combat should go from now on." So there you have it. Ace Combat 4 is one of my favorite games, and it largely holds up 17 years after its initial release. Please, for the love of God, play these 3 games before you die. And hey, if you hate them, you can come back and leave me a mean comment. Thanks again to Zaptroxix for letting me use your footage. In my ongoing effort to proselytize for Ace Combat, I'll be releasing new Ace Combat videos all through December and January, leading up to the release of Ace Combat 7. Next time, I'll be reviewing Ace Combat 5, and I'm sure if you've watched this far, then that's probably something you'd enjoy as well. If only there was a way you could be notified when it released.